me share my screen. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay. And just let me know when you want me to start.
Whenever you're ready, go ahead.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining in. I know we've been doing these every few weeks, and for everybody that's made the time to come out and takes an hour or so with us, so we really appreciate it. Today, we're going to be talking about equine mortality and health coverage, so equine insurance. We have Cindy Anderson, who's from Bridle Insurance, and myself. We're just going to be doing a little bit of an informal discussion of insurance, the different types of coverage that health insurance offers for equines. And Cindy's going to take a lot of questions and explain a lot of the different types of coverage and kind of how it works. So I just wanted to introduce Cindy. She's an agent employed with Blue Bridle since 1998. She is an equine liability specialist. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Equine Studies and has years of experience in stable management. She's a member of USEF, USDF, Eastern States Dressage and Combined Training Association, and she currently competes in dressage shows, if there were any, up to third level with her Oldenburg. So welcome, Cindy. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, everybody.
So for me as a veterinarian, the biggest thing is I really, and Dr. Vergara as well, recommend having a plan if there's an emergency, because a lot of times we get called out to farms and there really has not been any thought into if there is a serious emergency and a horse may need surgery or intensive medical care, whether they have a plan for, what would they be willing to send the horse into a clinic for treatment, or is the horse insured? And I just wanted to make the point that unlike human medicine, where most humans have health insurance, we as veterinarians have that difficulty in having to make decisions based on finances. So if horses are insured, or if we know that they're insured and that they have coverage, it does sometimes influence our decisions. We always try to provide the standard of care or the gold standard of what would be considered the best care for each individual situation, but sometimes finances limit that. So just having a plan for emergency care for me is really important, and sometimes insurance is the appropriate or the best way to do that, and that's going to be individual for every person. So that's something that I wanted to bring up as a veterinarian, and I don't know if you have anything to add with that, Cindy.
Well, usually when we issue an insurance policy, every policy will have some kind of stall card or a page with the 1-800 emergency claim number. And the rule of thumb is, and we tell all our clients, is that if you have to call your veterinarian for anything other than routine care and treatment, obviously call the veterinarian first, hang up the phone, call the claims adjuster, and explain the situation. The horse is lame, ill, injured, severely injured, might need to be euthanized. That way, the claims adjuster can gather all the information. So if your vet needs to make a life-altering decision, whether euthanasia or a surgery, the adjuster is ready to move on that. And the claims adjusters are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A lot of times farms will hang it on their stall, or they'll give it to the barn manager or their trainer. So if the person is never around, that information is readily available for the vet.
One thing I just wanted to show you guys, and this is something that we can talk about later, is when there is a claim that's put in, us as veterinarians, we actually fill out a veterinarian's report, and it's a very specific account of what happened and when the first time we saw the animal for this condition was, the diagnosis of, or maybe we might not even have a diagnosis at that time, or whatever we think could be the diagnosis, as well as prognosis. So prognosis means for life, like whether we think the horse can actually come through this with the treatment or and for soundness. So it's obviously dependent on the claim, and Cindy will talk about that later, but it's just something that I wanted to add in is anytime an owner submits a claim, they actually do send paperwork to us as well to gather all of that information. I'm gonna bring up the major medical, because I think it would be good if, Cindy, if you started to let them know kind of the coverages and all that. And I think this is probably the place to do it.
All right, I'm going to give a very brief overview of the different coverages that your horse could be eligible for. We can insure horses from 24 hours old up until 20 years old. After that, no company will insure a horse for 20 years old for mortality and any other kind of ancillary coverages, okay? So the first coverage is the mortality or the life insurance. That will cover you if the horse died or stolen or had to be euthanized due to any accidents, illnesses, injuries, lamenesses, or diseases. Okay, that is the actual policy. It's a mortality policy. Value, the underwriters look at numerous things, obviously purchase price, stud fee if it's a foal, training fees, show records, etc. Some people will insure the horse for what they purchased them for. Some will insure to value. And then there are a lot of people that will underinsure. I mean, I have some Grand Prix horses insured for the bare bones. So it's a personal choice. But as your agent, we just want to make sure that we're not over-insuring you. So if there's ever a claim, that there would be a problem. The next thing,
Cindy, can I interrupt you 1 second there? Sorry.
Yeah.
Can you discuss, since you brought it up, this is my question, how one dictates the value of the horse?
Well, I like to say it's like building a house. The underwriters on the application will ask what your purchase price is. Okay, that's the first thing. Usually, all the companies that Blue Bridle underwrites with we can only do purchase price for the first year of ownership. After that, you know, if it's a 2-year-old unbroke yearling baby foal, at next year's renewal, we can look if they've done any inspections, breed inspections, if they've done any in handwork, the breed shows, breed organizations. Then once they're ready to be broken, we can look at training fees. Usually you take training fees and take half of the training fees to increase the value. And then we can also look at show records. And the show records are, let's say you wanted to increase your horse $5,000 and you've done some basic schooling shows, unrated, backyard stuff. Okay, that seems to be reasonable. But if you wanted to increase the horse to $50,000 or raise its price to $50,000 in value, then we're going to need some pretty heavy duty show records. You know, some of the bigger shows, some of the bigger scores, year-end stuff, regional stuff, breed awards. So it's all relative as to what value increase you're looking for. But we always start at either stud fee for the babies, for the foals, and or purchase price. And then we go from there.
And Cindy, is that determined by the insurance company, or do you have to have a third party come in and like kind of do like a estimate, to, like look at everything and decide that and then report it to the insurance company? Like, do you have a person that is actually determines that, or is it whoever works with your claims?
It would be the company underwriters.
Okay.
All the companies, you know, we would as an agent, we would submit all the forms, all the show records, training fees. We would gather all the information, and then we would submit it to the underwriters, and it's the company's final decision.
Okay.
You know, and it all depends again on what value they're looking to insure their horse for. And mortality, foals have a high rate. And then when the horse, I think, is a yearling, every company's a little different. The rate goes down. And then when the horse turns 15 to age 20, the mortality rate ekes up every year. That's how the rate, and the mortality rates are determined by age, value, use, and breed. So obviously a thoroughbred racehorse is going to have a very high rate of 8%, where a dressage horse is going to have a 3% rate. So that's how the rates are determined. And you take the value of the animal and you multiply it by the rate to get your premium for the mortality. So that's how that works.
And for the mortality specifically, if the horse has a health condition that's known, is that something that would affect either the cost of the mortality claim, or would it also, could it prevent the horse from being covered for mortality?
Well, if a horse has numerous issues, yes, companies can decline to insure that horse.
Okay.
They can reduce the value, or they can decide to put exclusions on the policy. And I know we were going to wait and talk about that a little later.
Yeah.
But again, each company has their own set of underwriters, and we would submit everything to them and see what they say. Some companies are a little stricter than others. Some are a little bit more easier. So, we write with 6, Blue Bridle writes with 6 companies right now. There are other companies out there that we don't write with. So I'm not sure on their procedures.
Okay.
So getting to after the mortality, then we start adding on all the good stuff. This is everything, this is all the coverages that everybody wants. So the broadest, the most comprehensive coverage that an insurance company can offer is the major medical. Okay, you can see I have a little, Dr. Jess puts up a cheat sheet up here for you. You can see what the major medical does and does not cover. It's very broad. It would cover you for any surgeries or medical treatment that the horse may need, again, due to illnesses, injuries, lamenesses, and diseases or accidents. It does not cover, very shortened version, anything done for maintenance. Joint injections, vaccines, wormers, any kind of chiropractic, massage, any kind of spa treatment, joint injections, and any of course, any elective surgeries it wouldn't cover. It doesn't cover anything pre-existing. So if your horse had a pre-existing condition, that would be excluded. And anything not done by a veterinarian. So you cannot have your barn manager going out and, tubing the horse or doing sutures. That's not going to be covered. But again, the major medical is the most comprehensive. Every company is a little different as to the limits of the major medical, starting from $7,500 all the way up to $15,000. But every company has some kind of deductible. Every company has some kind of either sublimit or copay. It's no longer do they just have a deductible. They have either some kind of sublimit or copay now. But every single company has most of the deductibles run from $400 up to $600, depending on the limit of the major medical that you want. But again, it is the most comprehensive. Then going down from there, we also offer what we call accident and illness coverage. It is very limited, that it only covers you for specific external accidents and specific external injuries. So like founder, EPM, Lyme's disease, accidents would have to be by some external visible accident. The horse got kicked in the field, stepped on a nail. So it's very limited in what it covers. Some people that have numerous horses want some kind of coverage on their horse, so they will elect to get just the accident and illness coverage. And then down from that, we have surgical only coverage. That only covers surgeries done in a vet hospital under a general anesthetic. And then we also offer colic only coverage. It just covers any kind of medical or surgical colic treatment that the horse may need. Some companies, you are allowed to add on to the major medical extra colic and extra surgical coverage if you'd like. We also offer, it's called stallion infertility, which is rare, but we do offer it for any of those breeding farms that have stallions. If the stallion became infertile or impotent or incapable of servicing mares. We also have what we call a pro-foal policy. A lot of it's usually strictly for thoroughbreds because your thoroughbred industry does not have a live foal guarantee. So a pro-foal policy is basically that, a live foal guarantee policy. It would cover the embryo up to the 24 hours, and then the mortality would kick in after that. So that's some of the different coverages that we can offer. Did you want me to go into
Well,
more?
Cindy, can I interrupt you 1 second? I had a very good question from Barry, who
Okay.
asked, is there any discussions within the industry and the companies of insuring horses beyond the 18 or 20 mark that they currently do?
No, not yet. There are some companies will offer a specified peril policy for horses over 20. And the horse would have to die by one of 7 named perils: fire, lightning, collapse of building, attack by wild animals, drowning. You know, there a lot of people that live out in the Midwest that have like a range and the horses are out there. Lightning strikes are very frequent out in Montana on a 1,000-acre property. So when they have a lot of horses that sometimes they'll just want something on the horse. But that's really the only coverage for horses over 20, and it's very, very limited. I can't even remember the last time I paid a claim on one of those policies, because I have to die by one of only 7 named perils. But no, there has not been talk. Some companies, 18, they'll stop at 18. We have 2 companies that we write with at 18, they won't insure anymore, but the other 4 will at least go to 20.
Great, thank you.
What would you like me to do?
I have one question. For the accident and what is it? Accident and illness?
Right.
Yeah. If a horse requires surgery as a result of that, is that included typically in those? Or,
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. I didn't know if it didn't cover the surgical aspect
Right.
of things. It was just
And honestly, Dr. Jess, going from the accident illness to major medical is such a tiny premium. It's not a big, $300 difference. So we always try to encourage people, if you can really afford it, maybe get the lowest limit of the major medical and spend the extra few dollars, because it's just such a broader coverage.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think the one thing, just to chime in, sorry, Cindy, with the surgical aspect that I found in the surgical policies is that only covers what is in the OR. And there's a lot of things pre and post that are done with these horses, but it really only covers what's in the OR at that time.
Right, exactly. That's why we try very hard to encourage people to get the major medical, because of how broad it really is. And major medical, depending on the horse's value, a lot of companies, you cannot get major medical to your horse's 15,000 in value or greater. Some companies, you have to be at the limit of the major medical to get it. So that's, so for the lower valued horses that don't qualify for, say, the higher major medical limits, that's when I would encourage maybe to get the extra 10,000 colic coverage, just to give them a little bit more. Most mortality policies, I shouldn't say most, all of them now have some kind of built-in free of charge emergency colic coverage from $3,500 to $5,000. So that's free, it's built in. Like I said, all the companies that we write with have that built into the policy. So if your horse needed colic surgery, they would pull from that first before they would go to the major medical. So that helps too. It's a little bit extra, a little bit more. But I try to explain to people that vet bills, it doesn't matter if you have a $500 backyard pony or $1 million show jumper, bills are going to be the same. They don't, you're not going to give a discount to a cute little pony. The bills are always going to be the same, whether it's a colic surgery, all going to be the same. And when you price out this kind of coverage, I always encourage people to call your local vet hospitals, especially if you're not in our tri-state area, and find out what a colic would cost. So you kind of know what, maybe I should get that little extra coverage. Because what we pay here for colic surgery is not what Iowa pays for, and it's certainly not what California pays for.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you here, typically, like in my internship, we would quote anywhere from $3,500 to $5,000 for medical management of a colic, and surgical would be anywhere from $8,000 to $10,000 with no complications. So,
and that's the
with
claim
no
service.
complications. Yeah.
And I would say that those quotes probably are up by about 3 $3,000 now, especially with IV fluids being more expensive and things like that.
Yeah. So, and that's if the horse does excellent and leaves the hospital in the shortest amount of time possible. So,
Right.
Cindy, if you're willing for another question.
Sure.
Why don't you discuss who dictates the decision-making process with these cases?
Veterinarians.
And does the insurance company have any role in making those decisions?
When it comes to like a euthanasia, basically the underwriters and the claims adjusters always take their cue from the veterinarians. If you are telling them that you feel the need that this horse needs to be euthanized, they're going to abide by your decision. However, if you tell the claims adjuster, look, I can save this horse if I can operate on it, or if I can, medically treat it, and then the insurance companies want you to do everything in your power to do that. If the owner decides, nope, I don't want, even though you're telling the adjuster that you can save the horse, and the owner's like, no, just put him down, they can and have denied the claim. So the veterinarians are our first line of defense. And all the adjusters go off of your written reports that you guys do for claims, and also in the case that if a horse has to be euthanized. So that's why it's so important that, when you call the vet, you hang up that phone and you call that adjuster. So if a decision needs to be made, everybody's on the same page.
Dr. Fergari, do you have any other questions? I have a few slides that I just have some questions or some things that I wanted to bring up.
I always have questions, but go ahead. Why don't you do yours first?
Okay. So we kind of talked already about what may not be covered, all the maintenance stuff, routine health, and even corrective shoeing like hoof care. Cindy, can you explain, does your company do the annual insurance exams for horses, having a veterinarian fill out like an annual kind of physical exam? I know some companies have us do that. I don't feel like we do it that often, but if that's the case, how does that work? And I know some of them specifically ask questions on these forms that we fill out, whether they have any pre-existing conditions, what the physical exam was like, whether they've had radiographs or illness in the past year, and why are they doing that, and what's the purpose of that?
When we ask an insured to fill out a vet exam form that you and Dr. Fergara fill out, usually it's for foals. If a foal is in the first 30 days of life, we need a vet exam. We need to know the IgG and the blood count, the blood panel, which you guys have filled out those before for the babies. Mm-hmm. And then if a horse is over 50,000 in value and over 15 years old, so for the older horses, or if the horse is over 100,000 in value, then we need our little insurance exam form. And it's basically a 10-minute external exam. I don't need x-rays or anything like that. But usually it's due to the age of the horse and then the value. And each company's a little different, especially in the older horses, but usually 100,000 and greater in value, for sure, we're going to need a vet exam and foals, especially if it's new business. Or we can also get a copy of the pre-purchase exam, as long as it's been within 30 days of when they want to start coverage. So we can use that too.
That's another thing that I have a slide on here.
Wow.
So we do pre-purchases a lot to determine the risk of the purchase of the horse. These include physical exams, comprehensive lameness evaluations, worth flexions. We look at the eyes. We also sometimes perform, just routine like survey radiographs of like, say, hocks, stifles, neck, whatever the owner or the buyer requests. And sometimes we'll even do blood work at the request of the buyer. So do you have any insight as to, say we find something like mild hock arthritis on x-rays, how does this influence the horse's ability to be insured? And I know it's going to be case by case, obviously, but how do pre-purchases affect, potential to be insured in the future?
Well, pre-purchases, you know, like I said, we would either, when people apply for insurance, they have to fill out an application. And if they don't need anything filled out by the vet, then we would need like a little health questionnaire. So obviously, if the insured knew that upon the pre-purchase, you guys had found stuff like, you know, OCD, bone chips, arthritis, whatever, they would disclose that on that form. And again, if we needed a vet exam, you would have disclosed that on the insurance form, or if we got a copy of the pre-purchase, it would have been disclosed there. So, you know, at some point it would have been disclosed. And then what I like to explain to people, I guess, with applying for insurance, and these are legal documents. Insurance fraud is a very large penalty. So, you know, if you think you might not feel the need to fill something out, it always eventually comes out. At some point, it's going to come out, especially if, you know, your vet has to fill out a claim report and says, oh, I saw this on this day, or this horse had this prior to. Yeah, so that's why I say just when you fill out these forms, just disclose everything. And if, for example, like arthritis. So if your horse has arthritis, my older horse, Force, had an exclusion for arthritis. What's the treatment for arthritis? Usually joint injections. What's not covered under the policy? Joint injections. So you can see that, you know, a lot of things that people worry about, you shouldn't really have to worry too much about them.
Dr. Fugard, do you have anything to add about pre-purchases or any personal?
Yeah, I mean, I
had
one instance, actually two, one that I remember specifically, Cindy, and I think I did talk to you about. It was very frustrating that when we did our serial radiographs, we found some areas of arthritis in the hocks, which did not surprise me and didn't necessarily have me concerned. But then anything that I commented, and I try to be very detailed in my pre-purchase report, especially the radiographs, anything that I made any comments on got excluded. I guess, Cindy, the question is who's evaluating these and making these decisions? Are these veterinarians that they have with the underwriters? Is it just the underwriter? Like, what's their background?
Well, each company has extensive underwriting division, and I'm sure they consult with their own veterinarians to read and to review things. But most of the time, it's just the underwriters making that decision. Is it a risk that they want to take? You know, is it something that they want to be on? So as an agent, Blue Bridle gathers all the information, and the more information that we get from the veterinarians and the insured, we can make a case to the company, but it's the company underwriters have the final say in whether adding an exclusion or reviewing and possibly removing an exclusion. They're the ones that have the final say. I can kick and yell and scream, and we fight for our clients all the time. But again, it's the underwriters from all the companies that make that decision.
And it's possible they could go to another company
yes.
and not have that exclusion.
And some companies will exclude things that others don't, and vice versa. Again, as an agent, we try to do the best that we can for our clients. We write with only A-rated carriers. We don't write with, they're all A-rated carriers, and have written with them for numerous years. So, you know, we explain to the client, look, this company does not want to take this risk, but this company will take you, but you're going to have all these exclusions, or you might only be able to get mortality only. So we do try to shop for our clients and put them in the best place that we can.
So let's use the example of arthritis, and if you don't mind, we'll bring up Force if you're okay with that.
Sure.
What would cause one company, or pick a company in your head, don't say it out loud, and what arthritis criteria would exclude? Is it a specific joint? Is it the severity?
Well, usually with arthritis, they're going to exclude everything. DJD arthritis is usually the way the exclusion works. And what I try to tell people is, years ago, Force came up lame, and we did a complete workup on him, and we noticed that he had some arthritis in his front pasterns. So, okay, we went ahead, the diagnostics were covered, Obviously, I needed a joint injection that wasn't covered, but the lameness exam and the diagnostics were all covered because that was a new condition during that policy period. It was covered. However, when my policy renewed, now he's going to have arthritis for the rest of his life. So the exclusion is going to apply for that, because that is a condition that is never going to go away and it's never going to get better. So that's how that worked with the arthritis. Now, let's say he, when he cut himself, when you fixed his front leg, right? That was an accident. It was a severe injury, but he was fully recovered from it. So at renewal, I had you write a note that he was fully recovered from that injury, back in work, and I was showing him after that.
You were.
They because it was a deep laceration, there was no exclusion applied, because again, he was fully recovered, back in work, and I was showing at the time my renewal. A lot of the exclusions, again, are going to be conditions that are never going to go away. Ring bone, side bone, allergies. You've got your arthritis. Lyme's. Go ahead.
How does it work with medical versus surgical colic and exclusions?
Well, if you mean colic exclusions as a whole?
Yeah, so say the horse had a colic episode, had to go into the clinic, had to have fluids for an impaction, everything resolved normally. There's no expectation that that horse is going to have colic, a colic episode
Right.
again. But 6 months later has to do the same thing over again. Is that covered still? Is there a certain time period for that exclusion?
Well,
how does that work?
If a horse, with colic, every company is a little different with their colic exclusions. If it's, now I'm talking, your policy runs for 12 months. It's an annual policy. If your horse colicked within that time frame, okay, and it was, say, he didn't colic any other time during that policy period, depending on when he colicked. If he colicked right before renewal, they're going to put an exclusion on the policy. But let's say he colicked 2 months into the policy, and it was just like you said, he just needed some fluids, he was a little uncomfortable, but had no other colic for the rest of the policy term. We would submit everything to the underwriters, and as long as that was a one-shot deal, there should not be an exclusion applied. But let's say he had numerous colics throughout that policy term, then at renewal, they're going to exclude. So the way I like to explain the way colic works is that, because everybody's concerned, and obviously that is the biggest expense that we see as insurance agents, other than really weird, freaky accidents that you're like, wow, it's colic. Colic is always going to be the most expensive. If it's a medical colic, the horse has to go 6 months colic free, and we could submit to the underwriters for review. If it is a colic surgery, the exclusion will last for the whole policy term. After that, again, if the horse has gone colic free for a whole year, we could submit it to underwriting for review. If it's a colic surgery with a resection, or you've had numerous medical colics, the exclusion would apply for life. And again, we would gather all this information. We try to get vet notes stating that the horse has been colic free. We get the insurer to sign something. It's a colic statement of condition form. And we gather all this information and we submit it to the underwriters. Some companies might say, "Ooh, no, we want to wait a little longer." Some companies can remove the exclusion. So that's how the colics, again, we gather the information, we submit it to the underwriters, and it's their final say as to whether they want to take it off or not. But resections and chronic colic horses, then the exclusion for colic would be on for life, unfortunately. And it didn't matter whether you had major medical, accident, illness, surgical, or colic. The exclusions go through any coverages that you have, even and also sometimes the mortality.
Cindy, another question that somebody had, and you covered it a little bit, but I'd like you to address it directly, was certainly with the concern of exclusions during a policy period, people may be apprehensive to announce or call attention to any minor type of thing, injury. So what can you tell a policyholder on how do you do that?
Well, it's written right in the policy, according to your policy terms, that you have to report everything in. And that's the guideline I always tell people. If you have to call your veterinarian for anything other than routine care, you hang up the phone, you call the adjuster, and you say, look, I called my vet out, my horse is lame. It doesn't mean that you're going to be filing a claim, but it's on record that there's something wrong. Okay? And most policies, you have 60 days to call in a claim. I try to tell people to do it as soon as they call the vet so they remember. But after 60 days, oh, my horse was lame, back last year, I want to call in a claim. They're gonna be like, no, that's too long. You only have 60 days to call in a claim. So, and it is part of your policy condition, and companies will deny you coverage if you don't call something in within 60 days. Okay? So it's part of your policy terms and conditions. The second thing I always tell people is you're paying for this coverage. Okay? And both of you know that little things can go very major very quickly. And I would rather you call something in when it's minor, while everybody has a clear head, before we're looking at possibly, putting the horse down or taking to the clinic. So you should really, again, I can't stress this enough. As soon as you call that vet, you should call the claim in. If you do not report it in, it's eventually going to come out, because when I ask you to fill out your renewal applications, oh yeah, he was seen by a vet for this. And you're paying money to have that kind of stuff covered. That's why you have this policy. So definitely call it in.
I guess some of the concern is then getting hit with an exclusion. And I understand, what you're saying there, but I would say for a traditional foot abscess, I don't typically advise the clients to go and call that in, because we assume it's something that's going to be gone in a couple of days.
Well, that's where that 60-day rule is. Okay, that 60-day. And every policy is different. Every company's a little different. So some are 30 to 60, but I'm pretty sure most are 60 that we write with. That's where that 60-day rule comes in. That's why they give you a little 60 days. Your normal lumps, bumps, cuts, scrapes, maybe an abscess, maybe wait a little while, if you're just going to give it some SMZ, some ointment, put a wrap on it, see what it does. But the minute, obviously, you start to see that it's starting to go bad, or now they need to call you for a reason. So that's the gem, I guess, if you want to say, that 60-day rule. So if it is an abscess, you're going to come out, you're going to look at it, you're going to cut it out, pop it, and see what it does. Now, 7 to 10 days, if that abscess is no better, you're going to want to probably do some more heavy-duty diagnostics on it. Yeah, to see what's going on. So I just don't want, and as an agent, I have to say, call it in right away. But again, you have usually 60 days to call it in, but use that time wisely, and don't get caught going over that.
Yeah, I would say whenever talking with clients about, whether to call something in, I typically say, well, once you renew your policy at the end of the year, or whatever the policy year is, you're going to have to pretty much report that anyway, and then you're no longer going to be covered for it. So you might as well take advantage of the coverage now and then potentially be excluded. But at least you got that, you got the advantage of having the diagnostics paid for or whatever.
Right. And there have been
some minor things I can totally see, like not,
right.
Like a hoof abscess or something, but.
Right. And I've had clients call, they're saying, oh, my horse is lame and the vet's coming out tomorrow. And I will tell them, well, wait the 24 hours, have the vet do the initial workup. So you kind of can narrow. So when you call the claim in, you have at least an appendage to call in. And well, it's the left front. The vet did this, this, and this, but now the vet wants to do this, this, and this. So, if you wanted to wait till your vet came out to look at the horse, especially with a lameness, it's a 24-hour waiting period kind of thing, that's okay. But it's that 60-day rule you just got to be really careful about.
I feel like in the past, I'd say 2 years, I've noticed a bit of a change, and you and I have talked about it offline. It hasn't been a change because the policies have always been there, but I feel as if the companies have become more strict with it. And we've had several instances of people either not being renewed because they didn't report things before, or we did have one that they denied claim and they actually asked for money back because they felt that the company felt that the individual was not reporting it appropriately, and they were questioning whether it was insurance fraud.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's when it gets to that level, this is where an agent, we try, we can only do so much. When it gets to that point, again, it's the company underwriters and the claims department that make those kind of big decisions. Yeah, the companies over the years, I mean, I remember back when I first started, joint injections, if it were due to an accident, were covered, and they stopped that. Just like with GastroGuard. Now all the companies have some kind of $2,500, $2,025, they're only going to cover GastroGuard for $2,500.
Yeah, I had that highlighted here. That's a really big one that we call in claims for, is gastric ulcers.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that companies have, that truthfully probably is a large sum of money that those companies are giving out. And I know that there's always kind of a stipulation depending on the company with the gastric ulcers. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, gastric ulcers, when, years ago, when the GastroGuard and UlcerGuard and all that stuff came out, it was a godsend. I mean, it helped so many horses, and then people got creative. And we knew how, with all the studies on ulcers, and, babies get ulcers and shipping and showing. So a lot of people use it prophylactically, myself included. If my horse is going to a show, I'll put him on it for a few days. But what was happening is, when it first came out, we were paying claims, and then the claims kept coming and coming and coming and coming, and people were getting their horses scoped, and it was like millions of dollars in GastroGuard. And the company just said, we have to kind of curb this. And they understand, all the insurance companies understand, like, especially for surgeries, a lot of the vets will put their horses on post-op, especially if you're on heavy-duty antibiotics. I know Dr. Mike usually do that. So that's something a little different, because that's got to do with a surgery. But when ulcers are diagnosed, all the companies, it's a $2,500 cap, and that equates to about 45 days worth of GastroGuard, Dr. Mike? Is that about?
Yeah, a month of GastroGuard is around $1,200. So
right.
And then so usually they'll typically, at least from what my experience, because we have a gastroscope, so we've been doing a lot of those on the farm, is a lot of the companies they'll actually cover the scope for the diagnosis. They'll cover, whatever the cap is for treatment, usually about 30 days of treatment, and then a re-scoping to see, the effectiveness of the treatment.
Yep.
So that's typically what I've run into with the insurance company.
And I try to explain to people, I said, because then obviously the exclusion would apply at renewal. I said, yeah, but now you know that your horse had ulcers, and now you can treat that horse accordingly, and try to prevent them in the future. So it just got to the point where the insurance companies were paying millions and millions and millions of dollars just in GastroGuard alone. And for a lot of these companies to be able to still offer major medical, they have to kind of curb some of the treatments and some of the medications so they can still offer it. Because way back when equine insurance started back in 1980, or the early 80s, I remember my boss would tell me that it was usually just mortality and like colic coverage for racehorses. It didn't start to transfer transfer over to sport horses till a little later, like 82, 83. So that's where it started. It was mortality and colic only or surgical only on race horses. So to keep the coverage available to everybody, they have to come up with these, again, the deductibles, the co-pays, the sublimits. The insurance companies just can't keep up. They just can't. And a lot of the companies, the way it worked, I guess, did you want me, Doc, I know you wanted me to go over how a claim is paid. Now would be a good time.
Sure. Just so you know, we have about 10 minutes, well, 15 minutes left.
Okay. So basically the way a claim is, you would submit all your bills. The claims adjuster would automatically take off anything in that bill that's automatically not covered. So your farm call charge, anything like that, they're going to take that right off. And then they're going to get that amount. From that amount, now they're going to take off your deductible. Now your deductible applies per problem. It's not like human insurance, or we'd be paying human claims. Then they take off your deductible. Then whatever's left is where they would take the copay, or if you had a supplement on treatment. And then what was ever left is what you would get reimbursed. You have to remember, I know we talked about it before, but like if your horse passes and you need a necropsy, you would have to pay that bill. It's not a covered expense. Carcass removal, that's not a covered expense either. But that's how a claim is paid. And everybody.
But a necropsy is required for a mortality claim to be paid, correct?
Right. Yes. Unless, obviously, if you got to the farm and saw that it was very broken leg, then I don't think they would require that.
No, they usually, in those cases, I've found they just need X-ray verification,
right.
unless we do a dissection, which nobody likes us to do.
Right. So again, each company is different on that. So I always tell people, make sure you find that out before you remove the carcass, especially if you found the horse dead in the fields, or God forbid the stall. Then they're definitely going to want a necropsy done. Do not remove the carcass until your vet gets there. A lot of people have done that, or farm managers have done that, and it has jeopardized their claim. So don't wait till the vet gets there. Did you want me to talk about anything else?
One of the questions I have, seems like the companies over the past few years have taken away corrective shoeing for medical conditions. I feel like in years past that was something they did pay out, and now we have many, many more veterinarians who are also farriers in the world. So there is a legitimate medical treatment to this. Do you want to cover or discuss that?
What I've seen in claims, that is a very gray area, because every company has, a corrective shoeing exclusion on the policy. But if you have a horse with a fractured coffin bone that needs some kind of shoe/cast, I don't know, like I said, something like that, I would definitely submit, like those kind of things. But what was happening again is your farriers, you only have a certain limit of coverage. So a lot of the corrective shoeing, your horse is going to be in that corrective shoeing for quite a while after being diagnosed with, say, navicular. You need like a bar shoe or a wedge. The horse is going to be, where do you draw the line? Is it going to be covered for that shoeing throughout the whole year? Is it just for the first initial case? So there was just so much gray area with corrective shoeing that the companies just decided that we're just not going to cover that anymore. But I have seen some claims where there's been, fractured coffin joints, coffin bone, pastern issues where they do need, like it's a surgery, and during surgery they'll put some kind of shoe/cast on. I've seen the companies cover that. But that's very specific.
I guess one situation I think of in that case would be like a laminitis case that is intensive and needs either like clogs or some sort of shoe because of the current, acute episode. So I guess it's worth submitting and seeing if they
Exactly. I tell people submit everything. You never know. Usually a corrective shoeing is not going to be covered, but submit it in for sure.
How about, we have recently third parties involved with some of the companies, the underwriters, and I don't know what their term is, Cindy, you can use the appropriate term, but like Catch, what's their role?
Well, some companies, for example, Great American, they have their own claim department, their own people that process and adjust all the claims. There are some other companies that use adjusting firms. There are a couple out there, and they're just like a third party adjuster, but they still submit everything to the company that they are adjusting for approval, and it's the company that signs the check. So for example, Catch Equine would do the adjusting for they're American Reliable. So they're just another claims adjuster, but they have to submit everything to American Reliable for payment and payment approval. So that's what like some of the third party adjusting companies, and there are a bunch out there. There are a lot.
But in your example, American Reliable is the insurer.
Right. American Reliable is the company. Correct. And especially because all the claims adjusters are on 24 hours a day, so they need a lot of them.
I guess my only other, it's really not a question, but maybe you can, and I really don't want to point out one particular company, but I had recently a client take an insurance claim out for routine medical. It sounds like it was a company that was offering vaccines, dewormings, even dental floats, but it had to be done by the veterinarian. What's been your experience with that?
I think you're talking about the ASPCA.
Yeah.
They're new. I wouldn't say they're new, but they're getting into, like, you know how they can cover dogs and cats for routine care. Well, now they're taking it to the horse industry. I don't know how that works. I know that they're not an insurance company, and I know that they cover routine stuff. We kind of peeked at it. It was a little odd the way it worked. So I don't know. I haven't heard anybody file a claim, for reimbursement.
We had a client do it, and our experience was all the procedures had to be performed by a veterinarian. In this case, this client used a lay floater to perform the routine floatings, which wasn't covered. And that specific policy that they had only covered the what's traditional maintenance. And then if there was anything of and I can't remember the term, if it was illness or sickness is what they used, that was a whole separate policy, which of course my client didn't have.
Right. Yeah. So that's why I say I'm not very familiar with them, because they're not an insurance company. So I don't know.
Other companies that you know of that do something similar? No.
All the companies that we do routine care is always never covered. It's always excluded.
Of the things that Jess has up on this slide right now, anything specific you feel needs to be covered that you haven't covered in terms of diseases? Something that our audience might need to know?
No.
How about eye conditions? How far do they go with their eye conditions?
Well, again, if it's a new condition during the policy term, it would be fully covered. So like a uveitis, all the treatment for that year, and then at renewal, there would be an exclusion, because like a uveitis obviously is always going to be there. That's never going to go away. Right. Again, if it's an eye ulcer or an eye injury, at renewal, we can review and see where you are. Is it recovered? Is the horse back in work? Is it showing, or is it still healing? We'd have to kind of look at that. But before I forget, we get a lot of questions about SmartPak's colic care.
Oh, I was just going to ask you, how does that compare to like a program like that? Yeah.
What we've been told is that your insurance would kick in first, okay? And then whatever the insurance wouldn't cover, the colic care would. because again, they are not an insurance company. So ours would be primary and theirs would then be secondary. That's how that works. I have yet to talk to anybody that's actually collected from that. That doesn't mean that's a bad thing. But I don't, like I said, I don't know what you would have to do if there was a claim. Like I'm not familiar with how you process all of that if there was a claim. But I don't know of anybody that actually collected on the colic hair. But that's how that works. We would be first and that would be second.
Cindy, here's a great question. I think I know the answer, but I'll leave it to you. Apparently this individual has had choke excluded. Are choke cases excluded?
It depends on how frequently the horse is choked and when the horse choked and how bad it was.
So if it's a pre-existing condition or a repeated one, but the first episode, no.
Right. Like again, if it's a new condition during the policy term, then it would be fully covered. And then at renewal, see, the problem is, Murphy's Law. A lot of these things happen right before your policy renews. And then most policies have either a 90 or 120-day extension of medical coverage. So for those people that, their horse has an issue right before renewal, you get another 60 to 90 days to get bills in and submit things. So again, we would see at renewal, well, was it just a one-off choke? Is the horse has chronic issues? And again, we would submit all that information to the underwriters to have them review that.
So Therese obviously had this experience, and it sounds like it was the horse did it. It was the first time they would not pay out the claim.
They wouldn't pay it out.
It sounds like. Hey, Jess, can you bring her live?
Yes, I can. Hold on one second. I think I have to stop my share real quick. You said it was Therese?
Yes.
Okay. Hey, Therese.
Hey.
That doesn't mean you can see me too, does it?
Well, there's a photo of you.
Oh, shoot. Okay, my work photo. Yeah, so the horse choked. It was covered the first time, but on renewal, it was excluded.
Okay, so how long?
Long time spent.
All right, so when was the last time the horse choked? How long has it been?
Oh no, this horse is no longer covered.
Oh, okay.
So all insurance is off, but this happened, and then when I renewed, like months later, the choke was excluded in perpetuity.
Right. Well, a lot of times with that, sometimes the companies with a choke will want to wait a whole policy year to review it. Every company, and this is what I try to explain to people. Every company is different, and everybody's policy is going to be a little different because it's tailor-made to what you need or what you want. So some companies choke would have been excluded for a year. Some companies choke could have been excluded for forever. It depends. It all depends. Every company looks at things sometimes a little differently.
So I guess the follow-on question to that is, how do you know what the company's going to include or exclude if it's not written into the fine print? And this was Great American, by the way.
Right.
Through Bridle.
Right. So what we would do is at that point at renewal, we would get all your information of the policy year. You'd fill out your renewal application. You'd tell us how the horse is doing, what the horse is doing, showing, pleasure. Then we would submit everything to the company. And then the company's going to go and look at the claim report that was filed by the veterinarians. And then that's how they make their decision. They're going to look at your application that you filled out and then the claim report. And that's going to be their deciding factor as to whether they want to risk getting off choke, or they're not comfortable getting on, or they're not comfortable and they still want to exclude it. So that, like I said, that's something that we submit every year at renewal. We submit all your forms. We make the case, and then they tell us at that point, well, we're going to have to exclude. We're not comfortable taking that off yet, or we want to leave it on a little longer.
Thanks for those questions, Therese.
Thank you.
So I guess, Jess, as you start closing it out, is there anything specifically that last closing remarks that either one of you, Cindy or Jess, want to cover there?
The biggest thing that I can't emphasize enough is to, obviously read your policies. Read your insurance policies, ask your agent. If it's us, we'll be more than happy to talk to you, or whoever you insure your horse for. Read your policies, get questions answered up front. If you have questions about a claim, get in contact with your agent. That's what we're here for, to help you, to guide you, to get you to a claims adjuster or whoever. But reading the policy and clearing up any questions or any problems right up front helps us out tremendously. So that way there's no confusion. And then just be careful about that 60-day calling in a claim, 30 or 60 days. Some companies are a little different. Just keep an eye on that time frame. That would be my big things.
I just have one question to follow that up, Cindy. So like, say we started, diagnostics on a case, say it was a lameness, I don't know. And the horse ends up having navicular that we diagnose on x-rays. But we tried, say the first time we saw the horse was in February, and then we tried joint injections, and we tried this and we tried that, and we did x-rays. And then 6 months later, we say this horse needs an MRI because we think he has a soft tissue, something with the navicular. Is because we started that and it was an ongoing problem, is that still part of the same claim, or is it something that, because it's no longer within the 60 days, does that become an issue?
Well, you have 60 days to call to report a claim.
Okay.
Some company, that's just to report it. Some companies will only cover lamenesses for 6 months. Okay. Some companies will only will cover lamenesses for the whole policy term. So as I say, everybody's a little different on their major medical. That's why you have to be careful. So once you call that claim in, then you would have 6 months worth of treatment to do, x-rays, whatever you would need to do. Some companies, you would have the whole policy term. So if it's 2 weeks into the policy, you would have, 11 and a half months worth of treatment. So every company's a little different.
Everyone's different. Yeah. Okay. But I guess the biggest take home is, if you think you're going to have something be an ongoing problem, you should report it as soon as possible.
Exactly. You got it.
All right. Yes, well, I think that's all the questions I have. Do you have any questions, Dr. Fagara?
No, I just had one comment. I always tell people, think about what you're trying to achieve with your insurance. And, in some cases, it's not worth going through an insurance company. Some people will do it out of pocket. That's not to say I love the insurance companies, and I think they help us out tremendously to be able to, provide the care that we want to do. From the one thing, and I've learned a little bit from this as well, it seems like, if one company is not going to cover you, it's possible we can get another company. So you always have option A, B, and C. I think when I first came into practice, people felt like they could make money on an insurance claim. And that's not what the design of insurance is to do. It's really to defray some of the costs that you wind up having to put out there. Horses are expensive, and the bills wind up, racking up, and we get that.
And if horse insurance worked like human insurance, we'd be paying human premiums.
Right.
I mean, especially if they covered everything and you only had one deductible and they covered routine stuff. Yeah, that would be a lot of money.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. And thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you.
Have a good night.